Hello, everyone. How you doing? And you're very welcome to this week's last word in Formula One with myself, Aidan Raftery, and of course, as always, we have the most high profile Wexfordian that you can come across. That is Michael O'Grady. Hello, Michael. How are you? Are you well?
I'm not too bad at all. I have to admit, though, construction on this new, F1 Palace is going very slow at the minute, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, but perfection takes time.
Perfection does take time, and
You
fair. I
know.
agree with you on that. It's in Wexford now, so sometimes
Yeah.
perfection takes like lifetimes.
You'll have to do like the Wexford colours there. Maybe put a Wexford GA jersey there somewhere just to prove that you're from Wexford.
Oh no, I couldn't do that. I could start all manner of trouble,
You
especially with
know,
the
you know.
with the Kilkenny Brigade.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
all sorts could happen.
Well, that's it. That's it. And but yeah, so today will has kind of I suppose a techie feel to it in what we're going to be talking about this week. I suppose it's going to be like about the cars in general and the types of tires and things
Yeah.
like that, and some other interesting news and events as well on top of that.
Oh, there's always interesting news. But they did a little article this week on tires, which I thought that's not a bad idea because, a lot of people ask, oh, well, when did the tires start or knowing about the tires? And as well, there's been three kind of advancements this year, shall we say. Started late last year and barreling on into this year. And I just spotted them and I thought, it's a bit of interesting now to talk about that while we have no races because, as we know, we have to wait all the way to the end of the month for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I
Yeah.
tell you, I will have to be rerunning all Formula One races in every night of the week
How
now
are you
to
going to
do.
survive? How are you going to survive until the end of the month?
Oh, I know. Channel Four are going to stop showing the highlights shortly. I mean, there's just no point in being around.
What they're going to have to
Although
do is they're going to have to show our podcast. I think that's what they're going to have to do to plug it.
I think that's what they'll do. There is a couple of specials I saw at the minute in Channel 4, if anyone wants to tune in. David Coulthard in an F1 car against somebody else in a superbike, I think. I think it's a TV series.
All
Could
right.
be quite interesting because I remember the time David Coulthard went up against the Mercedes AMG top of the range high spec car in his F1 car. And that was quite an interesting little effort there, I
What
can
about
tell
what
you.
about what about that drag race between yourself and Coulthard there that down the motorway in Wexford?
Oh well, he couldn't get a dress to fit, so we couldn't do the drag race. Then it was all
Yeah.
called off. Really, he doesn't have the legs for a dress anyway.
Yeah, well,
You know
that's
yourself.
that's true. Yeah, and what about yourself and Paul Egan?
Oh well, now
The
Paul will
man,
be in
the,
a
the man,
Paul will be,
the man that we talk about, but the listeners and the people that watch this never see.
well. We'll actually have to see if the Central Intelligence Agency give us permission to talk about him more because we could be in trouble one of these days. But no, I wouldn't race against Paul. He's great. If you seen him running a pair of high heel shoes, I tell you, absolute magic. You'd swear he was just running
Chariots
like
of Fire.
absolutely, it's absolutely amazing going down the road. So there's no point in that case in the drag race with him. He's just going to run away with it.
Well, that's true, literally.
Run away with it. Yeah.
Pardon the pun.
The more sensible things.
Yes.
I did see a little article this week, and I'm sure a lot of people, well, I don't know if it happened across it or not, because it was kind of in back of the net sort of area, if you get me. And it was the beginner's guide to Formula One tires. Now, I found this very, very interesting in its own little way. That just gives you a little bit about it. And of course, if you look back in history, that'll tell you an awful lot more about tires too. For example, the tires in the 50s and the 60s, they actually used to be, was it four or five? Hang on, I have information here. One, two, three, four, five suppliers of tires in the 50s and the 60s. You had Dunlop, Engelbert, Firestone, Continental, and Goodyear. Don't ask me who Engelbert were, but they're obviously a good tire team. Whereas these days, well, we only have one tire supplier really, or one tire manufacturer, which is Pirelli.
Their companies going places.
Absolutely, I am telling you. I don't know why they switched to the one tire manufacturer because I think it was over really the debacle with the Ferraris years ago and the American Grand Prix with the banked corner. If a lot of people saw that race, they do know that only like two Ferraris and two other cars actually entered the race because everyone else said their tires could possibly explode in the high banks, which meant that basically they brought the wrong tires. Bridgestone, who Ferrari ran with, brought the right tires to the race. So There was a bit of a debacle there because there was obviously an awful lot of American fans who didn't get to see a race. Now, they did get to see Michael Schumacher and I think it was Felipe Massa going around the Ferraris, and they weren't holding back anything at all. They were at each other, which was nice to see. But I suppose when you're paying 300 and something euros for a ticket for a weekend and you only get to see two cars race on race day, I can pretty understand why most people wouldn't be happy about that.
Yeah. Well, if you had turned up there, that would have been three, so it would have been more interesting.
Well, that's true, and Paul refused to go on that day because he doesn't like.
They wouldn't pay his appearance money.
Well, no. He also has that issue with the banked corners, ever since the shrapnel that time, he sees banked corners and the lean and he tends to go that way like this a bit, So, that's another day's conversation, but, we can neither confirm or deny his actions on that particular day in a very foreign country and things like that. But anyway,
there's still an ongoing case going on there,
there is a very ongoing case going on, We do miss, I don't know about you, but I do miss the tyre war, I have to admit. There's a lot of things I do miss about Formula One. Is it better because of it? I don't know. I think the tyre war was better because, as the Michael Schumacher was asked, what tyres are you using today? Big black round ones. So, I mean, there was a bit more fun to it. There was a bit more cloak and dagger. You didn't exactly know what was going to go on. You couldn't say, well, lads, look, all the tyres will last around 20 laps, 25 if you're easy, because you don't know what the other suppliers' tyres are going to, how long they're going to last or what they've done.
We say, if you compare, we say, the old tyres from years ago to the tyres now, which last longer? You'd imagine that the newer ones would, but sometimes new doesn't always mean things last longer. I mean, anything that's made now doesn't usually last, whereas you'd often hear about things that were made years ago and they were made to last, but certain things aren't anymore.
Yeah, well, that's very true. The problem with tires in the last while, since we got Mon manufacturers, they're always struggling ways to slow Formula One cars down. That sounds absolutely insane. I know most people will turn around and go, what? But it is actually true, because the faster the cars get, theoretically, the more dangerous they get to a certain extent, because it is very hard to drive one of those cars around the speed that they go around at now. Now, manufacturers, drivers, everyone wants the car to go faster, but as well, what happens when you let the cars go an awful lot faster is the guys who are behind, the Hasses and the people like that, the Alpines, they get left behind because the bigger car manufacturers have more money to pump into research and development. The better people even doing it. If you've Adrian Newey, who's probably the best aerodynamicist there is, and you give that guy an hour compared to some other guy an hour, Adrian Newey's going to get more out of that hour than the other people will. And, if you're a lesser team, you can't afford Adrian Newey. So, I mean, I suppose it's in a certain way to try and bring everybody back together again. But because of that, the tyres have been designed with wear in mind. So, yes, these tyres could go a lot longer. These tyres could probably go a lot faster. But no, they want wear disposability in mind, which is kind of, I suppose, a concept disposability we've kind of come around in the last 20 years, maybe. But to me, if you can design a good tyre that'll last from start to finish, just depends on the driver, that'd be fine by me. I wouldn't have a problem with it. But that's the way to go. We've gone on to 18-inch tyres, of course, from 2022, and massive changes on the sort of technical background on them and things like that. Pirelli, they manufacture in more than 10,000 hours of indoor testing every year and 5,000 hours of simulations just for Formula One cars, nothing else. And they have...
Do you know another interesting one there, Michael, is, how much does it cost to make a Formula One tire? I'd say there'll be a few zeros after the first digit.
I would say so. Now I'm going to look into that one. I'm going to find out if I can find it for next year. But if you think about it, that's what 10,000 hours of indoor testing, 5,000 hours of simulation. Now this is an interesting one. 70 virtually developed prototypes to create 30 different specifications. Now, virtually developed. That's an interesting one. Now I have to admit, I thought tire being a very
virtually dependable. It's virtually dependable. Yeah, it's virtually made like. Is it as dependable as
Yeah. Well, I mean, a tire is a thing that touches the ground. It's great to be able to virtually develop it, but you're never really going to know what it's going to do until you put it on the side of a car and drive in anger. That just struck me as being very odd, I have to admit, you know. And it says here they're then tested by teams across more than 20,000 kilometers. How much money must it cost for every tire, for every manufacturer to buy every year? There must be millions worth of tires here. That sort of thing. That's one big animal. That's one big machine just to do that alone. I mean, 10,000 hours of indoor testing. You nearly want to be running cars 24/7,
Yeah,
yourself. It'd
yeah.
be absolutely just, it would be, I have to admit, just absolutely crazy, really. There was a successful 4 seasons, we know, last year with the new rules and things like that. And Pirelli then, now this year, have introduced compound tweaks. Now, this is a thing that catches a lot of people because they all say, oh, no, they used the soft tires last week. Why are saying they've changed and used the soft tires this week? That's the big thing about it. Really, it's a bad way to talk about it and a good way to talk about it because, technically it is a different tire. Actually, it's probably nothing. To the common man and to you and me walking down the road, there is probably negligible of a difference whatsoever. It's a soft tire. That is it. But there are slightly different compounds that go into each one to make it a little bit more abrasive or make it last a bit longer, handle a bit better, all that sort of stuff. So there are different compounds race on race, but people do tend to get hung up on that. And I wouldn't. A soft tire is a soft tire. The changes between the last track and this track could be just because there's massive temperature, could be just there's a lot of wear, could be just there's other problems on the track. The track is highly abrasive to tires. It's just to try and even them out so that, if it did 15 laps the last track, well, it'll roughly do 15 laps this track too. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. I think just give them the tire.
But
And
I
if
suppose
they
it comes down to how it's been driven. So we say if you
yeah, it
got one,
does.
if you got one car, right, and you put Max Verstappen in the car, and he did the 52 laps, and then you put Lewis Hamilton in it, for example, and he did 52 laps. Well, they're two different drivers, so that even though it's the same track, they're kind of it's kind of to each driver would drive it in a different way or in a different style. Or am I just am I saying something wrong there, or is
No, you're bang on the mark. If you put, we say, somebody, Max Verstappen's known for being very aggressive as a driver and very, very, very. I mean, he will drive over you to get around you. He attacks everything. Now he's incredibly quick, but that won't make your tires last. You look at the likes of a driver I was always very fond of, world champion Jenson Button, smoothest driver on the track. You could tell this because when it rained, it didn't really bother him. He was still very, very fast, and he didn't have to adjust his driving style by much. But he was very smooth, which means he didn't he didn't wear the tires as hard when he was driving. So Jensen could actually get 5, 6, 7 laps more than other people around him out of a set of tires and still have good speed. So yeah, it does depend on the driver. It depends on how taxed he is at the time too, I suppose. If you're in the middle and there's cars all over the place, you're going to be driving very differently. But the whole idea is to get a driver who's consistent, like Jensen Button, good on his tires and fast, because being good on your tires doesn't always mean fast. It's like everything. If you're going from Roscommon to Athlone on the back roads, we say, for example, and you're putting the foot into the road and you're going to, now I'm not condoning this. I'm only using this as an example. I'm not telling anyone to do
don't
it.
try this at home.
Exactly. Don't try this at all. But if you're putting the foot in the whole time and you're taking the road hard, then you get a corner, you have to really put your foot on the brakes. Whereas, if you're cruising along and you're not going too fast, you're not going too slow, and you hit a corner, you might not even need to touch the brakes at all. Therefore, you are actually using your tires less. You're less wear on your tires will last longer. And that's exactly the way it is with drivers in Formula One. It just, if you're a smoother driver, if you use your brakes less, if you use your brakes less harshly, you will basically have less wear on your tires. I mean, for me, if I see a traffic light coming up, and there's nothing in front of me, I'm going up to the traffic light, it's red, everyone's stopped, I just ease off the accelerator and let the car slow itself down a bit before I use the brakes, rather than drive up further and then have to use the brakes quite hard.
It's easier on the brakes as well.
It's easier on the brakes too. My current pair of brakes are 4 year brake pads are 4 years old. No sign of wearing yet, so I'm doing something right. Not quite sure what it is, but I'm doing something right.
That's the main thing.
with these new 18-inch tires, there's is 6 slick compounds, which is, from the softest to the hardest, I suppose, the race tires, going from C0 all the way up to C5. Now, the intermediates are full wets. Yeah, there's nothing with them really. There's, they are full wets, full intermediates. That's it. They don't get used an awful lot. They don't put as much thought into them. I mean, that's fair enough, really. With those tires, C0 being the best tire to be on, as in it's going to run very quick, but it's going to wear very quick. And then C5 is the hard compound, which is going to run a little bit slower, but you could close on twice the distance in them quite easily. So, with the compounds themselves, don't get head up on the fact that they're bringing different soft compounds to each one. It's just there is hard, intermediate, and soft. That's basically all there is. They may have 5 compounds. They only bring 3 on the day. Why exactly they only bring 3, I'm not quite sure. It doesn't actually tell me that here in the little guide I'm looking at, which I thought was, a bit unusual.
But I suppose just the decision on the choice of tire, I suppose it does kind of hinge on 2 things. I suppose it has to suit the driver, but it also has to suit the conditions or the track as well. And like weather's going to be like.
It gets a bit kind of closer, I suppose. If you were to use the 2 soft compounds closest to each other as soft and intermediate, which could happen, I don't remember it ever happening, but it is a possibility. Suddenly they're really close to each other. So suddenly the second one might suit one guy and the first one might suit the other guy, depending on how they're driving. For example, if the second one was, the first guy was going on it, he was a smooth driver, he might go for the first compound, whereas a harsh driver might go for the second compound because it'll last a little bit longer. So it really depends on how close the compounds are. But as a general rule, if you can keep the speed up and not pit, that's all the better. And it's something I do miss about Formula One too, is refueling. I know we had a couple of refueling accidents and that's why they got rid of it in the end. But I mean, when you look back at it, no one really got badly hurt and everything was pretty good and they had lots of regulations. It kind of missed a lot because now you're coming out, you're faster on a new tire. But the cars, when you're refueling, the car was heavier too. So that was slowing you down. So if you could stay out longer on the tires, the car was lighter and the car would go faster. So it was a little bit more unpredictable than it is now. But that's the way they're going, really. In 2023, there are there is a feature, revised qualifying format. It's actually out there for the purpose of evaluating revisions and subsequent information on tires. And this means tire compounds, like, they're given, the usual 3-part qualifying session and things like that for all the tires. And the RQF events, each driver can use no more than 11 sets of dry tires, right? There are slight reductions on the year before, but if you use all your dry tires, well, then you're going out in a used pair of tires, So qualifying is the biggest problem with that because, if you're trying to get the faster lap and get in there, you could easily use 3 sets of brand new tires to do that. You've already used a set of brand new in qualifying 1, a set of brand new in qualifying 2, and now you're using 3 in qualifying 3. So 11 sets sounds like a lot. It isn't. They run very quickly.
And I suppose therein is a point, Michael, as in with regards to tires, the tires they use in qualifiers, do they use the same tires then when it comes to the actual race, or how is that decided? And is it the driver that can decide on the tires, or is it the engineers?
Well, normally it's a combination of both. Normally, I would say the engineers have a big say on what goes onto them tires. The engineers know the car better than the drivers do, to a certain extent. The drivers know themselves, so you have to kind of figure out exactly what they want with that. Yeah, there is. With the qualifying session, the hard tires only in Q1, which is, it's a strange restriction, but I suppose maybe to a certain extent it's to slow cars down for Q1 to make Q3 more interesting. Q2 is only medium tires. Actually, this is something I'd say a lot of people don't know. And then Q3 soft, Q2 medium, and Q1 hard, which does make the cars go faster as they go along, as to say. After that, well then, after that, you have what tires you have left. If you use your tires, you use your tires, and that's it. Simple as that. But it is an unusual situation that they're trying to ramp up the qualifying by using, better tires each time. And a lot of people, I suppose, that's something I took for granted, but a lot of people might know. But again, sometimes it depends on the situation, because sometimes scrub tires, as they call them, or slightly used tires, can be beneficial in many ways, because sometimes on some tracks you get out in your new tires and you have to get temperature into your new tires, and they're lovely, they're beautiful, they just come out of the blankets and off you go, and it takes a bit of time to get heat into tires like that. Now, it's grand, most tracks are absolutely fine, but some tracks are not massively abrasive in the way they're done, so it takes longer to get the heat into the tires. So if you were
it's all about getting grip as well. That grip between the road, between the track and the tire as well.
That's exactly it. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to put heat into that tire to get the grip, to get the tire up to running temperature, to get it. Now, if you have a scrub pair of tires, the surface isn't as smooth. There is a little bit of roughness on the surface already. So that tire actually does get up to temperature faster. The only thing is it won't last as long. So in certain situations, there can be a moment where scrub tires, mildly scrub tires, are better to use than brand new tires on the side of the car. You'll see it on an odd occasion, doesn't happen all the time. But I mean, with last week's fiasco anyhow in Australia, and pit stop after pit stop and red flags and stuff like that, you never know. Someone could have thought, this is not a bad idea now. Why don't I change to scrubbed rather than new, so the temperature's getting in there quickly? So really depends on the situation, as to say. Moving on to the little technical parts there I saw during the week. There's a couple of little interesting little bits I saw on the car, which makes them quite good at the minute. There's end plates. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to hold it up here to the camera and see what you can see. There's little end plates on the side of the front wing of the car. Now, the bottom one is the end plates as per what the FIA want. And the top one is something that Mercedes did last year, which they have now allowed, which is a kind of a little cut at the top of it, as if it's sweeping in. The end plate is supposed to be flat in one piece, but they've kind of allowed that. Now this is the reason this really interested me. Because another issue with that was, further on the line, I found out about rolled end plates, rolled wing end plates. Now, if you look at this guy here, and you see this little rolled piece here, this was something that Aston Martin did last year. Now, it was basically, they wanted to get rid of the sharp edges on the back wing that create the vortices so that cars could travel closer together. But, of course, as it is, we all got rid of, but Aston Martin decided, no, I know a way to get around that. And they did. Now, that particular design was outlawed because it wasn't correct. Now, the thing was, the front end plate, as you saw, the cutouts were left in it and are still there. Now, this was a very interesting situation for me, because I noticed that there was a bit of a tip off the FIA there, and I'm just kind of looking for it here now, that basically they said, for the next year, say, but in most cases, the solution we don't like, which is more comfortably on the legal side, is what they normally go for, right? But we can't change the regulations unilaterally. We have to follow the governance. If we don't manage to get enough support from teams, we have to accept solutions which stay on. Now, that is the most curious little statement I've heard in a long time, because basically what they're saying is, yes, it's illegal, but no one wants to take it away, so okay, now it's legal. It's a bit of a strange situation, and that was why.
It's a bit like referee. It's a bit like the rules of Gaelic football or hurling. The rules are there, but they're not always followed.
Absolutely. So you've the Mercedes adapter to
it's open to interpretation.
It is, and they're creating little slots in it so that air can come out of it in a certain way, which is obviously aerodynamically beneficial, but does not make the end plate one piece anymore. And the regulation said it does. And then you had sort of Aston Martin with their little circular section creating the vortices again, but giving the car better aerodynamics. And that wasn't allowed because basically Aston Martin went, okay, all right, lads, we'll change that then. So it does seem like a very strange situation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Very, very funny. I suppose we'll, as our time is pounding on, we'll probably head on to news. There was a few things going on last week. One of them is kind of snowballing a bit. You remember last week we made a mention of the fact that Toto Wolff had said that he was worried over that mind-boggling pace of Red Bull, which was like saying, hey lads, what's going on here? And as we said, pot calling kettle black and all that. Well, it's now got on that there has been a little bit of a mention from George Russell, and Christian Horner has now responded to that, because George Russell has insinuated basically the Red Bull are sandbagging and they're not going as fast as they could in the last race. Now, Christian Horner, he was joking about the George Russell being very generous about the car, But I mean, to a certain extent, he has said it, and I can understand. Max
it would beg the question as to why.
Well, it would beg the question as to why. Yes, I mean, okay, Max was scampering off into the distance. No one's arguing with that. But what do you do when you get a good lead? You kind of turn the car down a little bit. You take it a little bit. Now, when I say a little bit easier, maybe 1%. A little bit easier. So you don't run the car at full capacity because you don't need to. And there is engine restrictions and parts restrictions. So you don't want to blow anything. So you turn it back a little bit. So that's kind of obvious that happens. But I mean, if the Red Bull had so much more to give, wouldn't Sergio Perez have been on top of him by the end of the race? Which he wasn't. So I mean, it's kind of an odd situation. I can't guess as to whether the finger was pointed quite definitely at Mercedes in the hybrid era came out when they took over Hamilton, because the car was just so fast all of a sudden. With 200 hours extra testing, was a half a lap ahead. Now all of a sudden,
in that case, who would you point the finger at, the car or the driver?
Point a finger at the car and a bit of a brown envelope, if you ask me, because they shouldn't have had 2 hours extra testing, and it was all brushed under the carpet. There was rumours Ferrari were threatening to walk because they said they can't compete with that, which proved they couldn't. But in this situation, it's kind of, are we trying to point this way to deflect from something that way? I'm not quite sure, but we know Red Bull last year won, and a difficult year, last year won. The year before it was a difficult year, and the year before they were sort of behind them the whole time. So there is a progression of the cars. So you can't really say they got a leg up or they just suddenly went boom. They didn't. Mercedes did that. They went from mid-ground to half a lap ahead of everybody. So there had to be something specific there, as to say. But look, ours is not the reason why. Ours is just to say that's a bit unusual for you to say there, lads. Calm down a little bit.
That's right.
There has been Ferrari have petitioned the FIA for a review of Carlos Sainz's penalty in Australia. It's 5-second penalty, which I think they should.
That's a huge penalty, isn't it? We were saying that last week.
Yeah, and it's only because you've restarted the race. It was massive. If it was at the end of a race and he got 5 seconds, he might have lost 1 or 2 places. But he lost a dozen places nearly. Well, half dozen places anyway, because it was a restart. So if everyone was going back to where they were, you can't give a guy a penalty because of what happened afterwards. You have to go back to where they were and give the penalty, which maybe a grid place.
Sounds like it was given in haste.
Exactly. And I don't think it should have been, really, to be quite honest with you. I think it's, he should have been given a slap on the wrist, maybe a 2 or 3 place grid penalty next race. But I think that 5 seconds was just too much, or 5 seconds was just too much on a restart. That was just way too much. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But Ferrari are anyhow, they're banging desks and giving out, and they've thrown Teddy out the cot, and this is all going to happen, or they're going to pout a bit more. It's as simple as that. There's a couple of things actually on Aston Martin were going up, and a couple of people, including Lawrence Barretto of F1.com, has been writing quite immensely about how good they're doing at the minute. The real interesting thing is, I don't think anyone in Aston Martin really expected it to be as big as it was. But it is. But the one thing that they're saying currently at the minute, well, Lawrence is, Aston Martin aren't, they're of course being very tight-lipped, is there's actually plenty more to come. So we'll see what happens with Aston Martin on that one. That could, yeah. Toto Wolff is confident, by the way, that Hamilton will extend his Mercedes contract at the end of the year. There was that silly little question with someone put to Christian Horner about Lewis Hamilton. You'd wonder if that was fishing or not. But hey, look, there you go. Mick Schumacher could be back next year. We're going back a bit there. Because as we know, he was sent off by Steiner and Haas, but it was mainly because they said he did a good job, but they needed a US driver to carry the team forwards. and now he's a reserve driver for Mercedes. But he's already had some interesting parties, so he could be back for 2024.
Interesting. You heard it here first, folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. First here and first, and that's it. Has to be true, so.
Rosfm exclusive.
Has to be true, so. Also, there was another old driver that might return and has been given a hint. Danny Ricciardo could, one of these days, by Christian Horner, return in a Red Bull car. That could be an interesting situation. I still think Danny's hard done by. I think Danny deserved more than he actually got. He's a better driver than I think they are, and he doesn't get credit for it. So I'd love to see Danny back in F1 again. It would be just incredible rather than a reserve driver, So, I mean, gone but not forgotten. Mick Schumacher, Danny Ricciardo, two good drivers. Gone but not. Perhaps we need another Formula One team, Aidan. Perhaps this is Paul Egan's. Yeah, perhaps this is Paul's thing. Egan F1. He's always wanted to do it. I mean,
taking over from it'd be. Well, again, watch this space. This is the watch this space section of the.
This is the watch this space section. I'm even pointing to watch this space. Yeah. Pardon me, still a touch of a cold. And his new advanced Morris Minor engine is supposed to be very good, actually. So, sticking that in an F1 car could get somewhere.
You can't get much more top than the Morris Minor.
You can't get, I'm telling you, you can't do much better than that, as they say, Another quick one this week, Zane Maloney. He is an F3 world champion now, Formula 3, which is, a little bit normally you go Formula 2 and that, but he has been signed up as a reserve driver for Red Bull from here onwards for F1 from 2024 onwards. So that's an interesting situation, consider Danny Ricciardo's a reserve driver for F1, and there's been hints he might be returning to F1. So it's a little interesting little situation. Perhaps we're reading things that aren't there.
Because you never know, or you might be prophesizing.
Perhaps we're looking in between big two words. Bars. Yeah, perhaps we're looking between two bars of chocolate, seeing the silver tinfoil when it actually isn't silver tinfoil. It's only one bar of chocolate. But who can say?
Well, there you go. So listen, that's great. So thanks very much for taking the time out to do Last Word on Formula One, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. And what will we be covering next week?
Well, we'll be covering the news as usual. There will not be a race, but I was thinking of looking back on a driver in which, talk about charismatic. I was thinking of looking back at Alain Prost and going through the life of Alain Prost a wee bit, if that suits it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, a good driver.
Yeah, very good driver, and it's a bit of a legend at this stage, I suppose. In a lot of cases, a bit of a legend. So we have to cover the legends every now and again, don't we?
Well, sure, this is it. I mean, we already cover you and Paul Egan, so there you go. Yeah. But, here's one for you, just to let the listeners know out there as well. And the Rosfm 50-50 draw.
Yes,
there last Friday, but now it has gone online, so you don't have to use the envelopes. You can just click on the link on the website rosfm.ie, and you can now pay for doing the 50-50 draw online, which is an awful lot handier from anywhere in the world. So you don't have to go into the local shops in Roscommon to get them. You can get them anywhere in the world. So and you could be in it's kind of split the pot. Half of it goes to the half of it goes to the winner, and half of it goes towards the expenses of the station. So it's just a great way of getting out there, and it makes it an awful lot easier for listeners or anyone that wants to enter the draw.
Yeah, well, I think community radio is very important. I think people should enter the draw because I think it's a great system. They don't realize that nobody on Rosfm and community radio station makes any money. We're there doing it for the sheer fun of doing it, and you're there doing it because, well, people enjoy listening to it, and people enjoy listening to local people talking about local things and local interests.
There you go. And people like yourself talking about Formula One, or people like us talking about Formula One. So that's it. So thanks very much for that, Michael, and we'll talk to you again next week.
No problem. Talk to you again, Aidan.
No problem. Thanks very much. And that was Michael O'Grady, our Formula One expert.